Part 1 Orange Radio. RJ. I sat again in front of the microphone for my beloved live program, Rush Hour. It had been 3 months since I was in the studio. No one had expected me to go live as soon as I returned, or for that matter, even written. Maybe that is why our program manager, Imtiaz sir, told me you don't have to go live if you are not up to. Just record something. He was trying to be kind, but it made me sadder. To not go live, is that why I returned to the studio, even though Taya and my chachas told me not to? Is that why I asked the studio to announce my return, even when they were hesitant? Does Samira give in that easily? For the last 1 week, the studio had been airing ads announcing my return. Since then, listeners had been calling and texting and emailing the studio to express their delight. I could not disappoint them. They are my strength. My grief is my own secret, but in public, I am RJ Samira. I am pour happy words into my audience ears, ask nonsense questions and listen to sweet nothings. That's the Samira whose written they are looking forward to. And that is what made me get back into the live studio. Still, I did not like my intros to the first 2 songs. It was as if that old Samira who turned into a river of talk in front of the microphone had run aground. I stumbled over some words and misspoke some names. I even asked Kapil Bhai at the keyboard if he would write a couple of sentences for the next song. But Bhai was confident. Don't worry, you will be fine by the next song. He knew that I never prepped my intros. I would just listen to the song and improvise. That was my style. And that's why, even 2 years after my program began, Rush Hour still had an excellent ratings. Kapil Bhai was right. By the 3rd song, I was back on the track. My listeners were eating out of my hands. They welcomed me back happily. Some of them reapproached me for taking such a long holiday. Others wanted to know if I had a fun vacation. Yet others wanted to know where I had gone on my holiday. I gave them answers they loved. I laughed with them, played with them, flirted with them. The hour-long show was about to wind up. Just then a live listener asked, "So what news at home? Are your Baba and Mama doing well?" Yes, they are well, very well, I said, choking down a wild scream. Each listener is different. It's hard to guess what might come out of which mouth. They all have demands that go beyond radio time. Some want my cell phone number. Others want to chat by email. Some ask for a photo. Some want to meet in person. Of course, there are always those who are looking for a romance. And the ones who want to marry me. And the ones who want nothing less than my body. I still remember one of my listeners. He always sent SMS to my program. Then he started calling regularly. Poor guy. He was a security guard at a construction site, somewhere far away from the city. My songs and chatter kept him going through his lonely days. I always had words of comfort for him. One day during a live show, he started crying. He said he loved me and could no longer live without me. For a moment, I was tongue-tied. Then I took a deep breath and told him that he must love me like a daughter. My words calmed him, and that day, in the office as well as outside, my compliments came my way for my level-headed answer. A good RJ never loses her cool. Whatever the provocation during a live show, I had always passed that test with a positive. And yet today, I was taken aback by a standard question. The truth is, it shook me. Even though my listener kept talking, I could not respond. Kapil Bhai was gesturing at me from beyond the glass wall to say something, anything. There was silence for a brief while. Radio is not like TV. A moment's silence can seem as long as a century. Kapil Bhai put a song on to cover up. I could not stay in the studio any longer. I took off my headphones and left, not bothering to even finish the program. There was nobody else in the studio at that time. The station was to air a recorded program for the next 2 hours. The morning program was over and most of the staff had finished for the day. The rest were in the canteen. I sat down and closed my eyes. It's best to be alone when you are sad. I wanted to be by myself and feel my strength slowly seeping back into me. After a while, I lost track of time. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Fatima Shahid, the head of advertising. She had been absent during the morning commotion. I remembered then the moment had stepped into the studio in the morning. Everyone had crowded around me. They engulfed me with sympathy and love. Some stood nearby silently, hands folded across their torso. Others offered words of consolation. Some expressed their sorrow, yet others were angry on my behalf. Philip Matthewser, who went by the nickname Sheila Garments in office, patted my head as if I were his daughter. Everyone got a pale smile from me in return. Our station manager, John Machina, offered me a formal condolence and returned to his cabin. I appreciated that. Not much else was necessary after all. All those other gestures of sympathy seemed a little melodramatic to me. My loss was mine and only mine. For the others, it was just a matter of words. Fatima madam pulled a chair and sat with me for a long time with my hands in hers. Then she started sobbing, and just like that, I began to cry as well. Fatima madam is one of the strictest managers in our office. I have never seen her be tender with anyone. We radio artists tremble when we hear her name. If we are late in inserting ads, or God forbid, miss an ad during the program, she turns the office upside down. As far as she is concerned, the station exists to broadcast ads. News and other programs are filler items. What is more, our office has a strict rule banning any non-professional relationship between management and artists. And now, without paying heed to any of this, she was sobbing loudly in front of me. So there I was, stuck trying to comfort someone who had come to comfort me. When she finished crying, she opened her bag and showed me a strip of pills. This is what keeps me alive these days, Samira. Someday, without this, I might die. She said, her face red. I had no idea what was wrong with her. Did she have some mental illness? She understood my confusion. Samira, all this happened when you were away. One day when I left the station, a taxi started following my car. It was parked right outside our main gates, as if waiting for me. The driver tracked me closely, always keeping 2 or 3 cars between us. I did not think it was a big deal at first, but after the taxi missed a couple of opportunities to overtake me, I noticed it and was struck by a lightning bolt of suspicion when I saw that the taxi was still behind me. After I stopped at a bakery and then at a cafeteria to buy sandwiches for my children, I could not ignore it anymore. Just to make sure I was not being paranoid, I went out of my way into a couple of gullies. I took a U-turn at a signal and drove back the way I had just come and then went around a roundabout. and got back on my route. The taxi was still behind me. I started sweating. My legs were trembling. I pressed down on the accelerator. The taxi speeded to keep up with me. I slowed down, and so did the taxi. I cut through 2 red lights to escape, but the taxi followed me through the red lights. It followed me all the way home. When I got out of the car to open the garage, an enormous man got out of the taxi and approached me. That's the last thing I remember. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in bed. Shahid's mother and sisters were sitting by my bedside. They told me that some passers-by had found me lying unconscious on the street and brought me home. I have never been so scared in my life, Samira. I saw the taxi driver again and again, on the street, in the bazaar, at the park, and many other places. Wherever I look, he is there. Sometimes just beyond the window, sometimes on the roof of the opposite building. I hear the doorbell ring and run to look through the peephole, and he is in the corridor. Or I hear a movement in the bathroom, and when I check, he is hiding behind the door. When I walk on the streets, I can hear his careful footsteps. In the supermarket, I can see his shadow looming 2 aisles away. I told myself it was my imagination, but I did not believe myself. I did not know what was real anymore, the reality of my mind or the reality in which everyone else lived. My fears reached the point where my Baba took me to a psychologist. When I take the pills the doctor has given me, I feel better. And that is why, how am I surviving now? Not just me, my father, mother, and even my son, who is in the 5th standard. We are all on these pills now. You know, Samira, it was on the 3rd day after that man followed me home that Shahid went missing. Fatima madam went back to her seat, her breath heavy with exhaustion. I continued to sit there, numb, not knowing what to say or think. Javed, that was the day I got your letter. A place not my own. Our studio airs to different FM stations at 2 different frequencies. Orange Radio, which operates at 103.6, is the Hindi station, and Tunes Malayalam, which operates at 98.7, is the Malayalam station. The government had auctioned off the 2 frequencies to Broadway Communications, our parent company. After Arabic, Hindi and Malayalam are the most widely spoken languages in this city. Both our stations share one live studio, so we alternate with each other. When the Hindi team is live, the Malayalam team airs a recorded news program and vice versa. Of course, listeners never figure out all these logistical arrangements. In fact, it took me a while after I joined to understand how it all worked. We had no rivals in the city, so we competed against each other. If Tunes planned a new music program, we would come up with a live game show. If they declared a prize, we would try to declare a bigger gift voucher. We argued endlessly about our ratings. We claimed more listeners and they claimed more advertisers. And maybe because of that, Rajivan, Sir, and the rest of the management were a bit biased towards them. That made the Tune staff swagger a little. They did have a good team. Sharon, Minesh, Meenan, Viju Prasad, Anamika, Sheetal, Mridula, Avasthi Pillai, Viju Prasad and Sheetal were the news people. The others were in entertainment. We called them the Malayalam Mafia, usually behind their backs, but when annoyed, to their face too. Imtiaz sir, Charu Hassan sir, Shahbaz, Soumya, Nasir, Meera Muskan, we were the orange team. Meera ran a couple of live programs and read the morning and evening news. Beside regular like us, There were also a few part-time guest artists. Since the broadcast center was affiliated to the Ministry of Information, there were several other stations in several languages. Running out of the center, including BBC at 101.9, though we were all different stations. Since the studio and the technical facilities belong to the government, it might be best to describe us as several small outfits operating under one umbrella. Like many stores in one mall, you know how it is when you arrive in a new place and feel like you don't belong there? That hesitation to reckon with a new geography, that knowledge that this place is not mine. These ways of talking are not mine. These silences are not mine. This etiquette is not mine. So many new things to absorb, and the place also takes a little time to accept the new person. Often you have to meet the place on its own terms. Sometimes you have to work hard to earn your little corner in it, till that place becomes yours, till you find your own equilibrium there. There will be a gap between you and the place. It was at the studio that I first experienced this. It seemed a very strange place to me in the beginning. Till I arrived in the city, India was something I had feared. I had always seen Indians as my enemies. Enemies who were lying in wait to attack my village, my Lahore, my Faisalabad, my Peshawar. They were shooting into my borders, making terrorists out of the poor fishermen they captured, branding poor wood collectors in the border forest as trespassers and killing them. They were lining up my innocent brothers and sisters in Kashmir, shooting them point blank and publishing their photos in newspapers, labeling them terrorists. Each and every Indian terrified me. On my first day in the studio, I was shocked to see all the Indians walking around. How would I walk among so many monsters? Impossible. What if they all turned against me and killed me? I puzzled over my dilemma all evening. This was a job I had longed for, and I had fought for it at home. I was embarrassed to admit that I did not want it any longer. Even more embarrassed to admit that I no longer wanted it because of all the Indians in the office. I knew that Baba would say, then don't go anymore. I wanted to go and I didn't want to go. I made up some pretext to go to Mamu's house that night. First, Mamu teased me, but when he saw that I was serious, he reasoned with me. Samira, that's the kind of silly notion we hold on to. When in our little country, once you step out, you realize there are good people and bad people all over the world. National boundaries are just illusions. And okay, so what? If they are these monsters you make them out to be, then your job is to face them with courage. You have Khan blood in you. The Khans have never failed in a fight. Go win the fight. God knows your tongue is strong enough. If Mamu had not cheered me up that day, I would have quit my job on day one. But in fact, much faster than I expected. I began to belong in the studio. I started looking forward to every day and every moment I spent there. In all these days, I have never taken an unnecessary day off from work. While everyone else waited for the weekend, I waited for the beginning of the week. If someone was on holiday, I leaped at the opportunity to do their show. As my co-workers ground at the burden, nobody wanted to do the 10 p.m. live show. Pillow music, except me. At this rate, Baji will have to move into the studio. Nawaz would say, tell us the truth, Baji, do you have a secret lover at the studio? Farhan teased me. That's how crazy I was about the studio. But now, I have lost all that excitement about going to the studio. My heart turns to stone when I step outside the house in the morning soon, after the driver's missed call. Kettle class Mercedes. Our office vehicle is a Toyota minibus that can seat 16 people. We call it Kettle class Mercedes. There can be no better name for this vehicle. It is practically a bullock cart, although it looks good from the outside, the inside is a different story. Air conditioning does not work unless it is a good day for your zodiac, but astrology or not, it is out of commission for a couple of days every week. Eunice, our driver, was a sweet man. Madam, it's a new vehicle, but the engine seems to be acting up. He always had excuses. Eunice would give me a missed call from the street outside my house at sharp 50 in the morning so that I could get in for the live show at 8. He would wait for a minute more and give me another missed call. If I did not get into the car by then, he would leave. I could not blame him. By the time he did the rounds of 100 of streets and gave missed calls to all the RJs and survived the traffic jams and waited at every single in the city at least twice over, it would often be past 8. Kapil Bhai or Asif Bhai, whoever was at the switchboard, would cover for us with a song or an ad till we ran in and got on air. Being yelled at by Imtiaz sir had become a daily ritual. Then we did it all over again in the afternoon. By the time I got home after the morning show and touring the city, it would be 4 or 5. I would get dropped off at the very end, being the furthest along the route, with only one other person remaining. A Sri Lankan man who worked in IT. Several times I had proposed very reasonably that since I was the first to get picked up, I should be the first to get dropped off, but the Malayalam mafia stood as one against my appeal. Once or twice a month, as a favor, they would let me get dropped off first. But in return, I had to buy them juice or samosas along the way. Around the time I had joined, Kettle Clash was completely dominated by the Malayalam mafia. As soon as I got into the minibus, I could hear their annoying chatter, their voices like stones in a tin can. They were experts in speaking exclusively in Malayalam without using even a single word from Hindi or English, so that the rest of us might not even guess what they were saying. Later, they even started a radio program based on this. I would plead with them, "Aren't you tired of blabbing in your own language all day? Why not give it a rest now?" And they would retort, "That was for the public, this is just for us." We had a staff member from Morocco who complained that the Malayalam mafia was talking about him constantly. Eventually, that made him quit the job. This was how the Malayalam mafia operated. I realized later, when they wanted to smoke out someone they did not like. They had sent 3 others packing since my arrival, but their pranks did not work on me. Also in the bus were 2 Philippines, Jonah and Irene, who worked on the admin side. The Malayalam mafia referred to them Shashikala and Pusht Palata. Women had no idea. As soon as Irene and Jonah got on the bus, they would put on their headphones and lose themselves in music. After that, even if the Malayalam mafia turned the bus upside down, they would not care. Whereas I could not just sit and listen to music. Amidst all that cacophony, my ears would tune into the conversations even without my knowledge. At first, I tried reasoning with them that all Castle class conversations should take place in a common language and that I too had a right to enjoy their jokes. But the Malayalam mafia did not listen to me. Once in a while, when they broke off to speak in Hindi or English, they would sneak in some tones aimed deliberately at me, and Shahbaz, hot-headed Shahbaz, would not let it slide. He would lash back completely out of proportion, and Hassan, our translator, would join him. Then it would become a free-for-all. At first, I simply listened to these quarrels, but slowly I joined the Shahbaz Hassan faction. Not so much because I agreed with them, but because I wanted to disagree with the Malayalam mafia. Maybe Pakistan had lost a match to India that day. Or maybe our border forces had fired some shots into the air. or maybe one of the two countries had spent up a missile, or there was a terrorist attack somewhere in India, or one of the foreign ministers had made a controversial statement. I had to take responsibility for whatever it was. You know me, Javed. Would I take something like that lying down? Each day's travels in Castle class would end in our own war. Some days I would try to ignore them. But you know how some kids will stick their hands down a dog's throat so they can get themselves bitten? The Malayalam mafia was like that. They would drop some controversial topic into the conversation to get rise out of me. Viju Prasad, news coordinator of the Malayalam department, was especially good at this. Ya Allah, he was something else. He was convinced that India was the most amazing country in the whole world. India had invented rockets, airplanes, the internet, mobile phones, test tube babies. Poor Shahbaz and Hassan would gape numbly as he boasted. But not me. I know my history. I did not have to listen open mouth to this crap. The most annoying of Viju Prasad's many brags was that India was the only country that had never attacked any other country in the last 5,000 years. At first, I pretended I did not hear this. Then one day, I got back at him. Yes, it's true that India has not evaded anyone in the last 5,000 years. You know why? I asked. Because India did not have the time. You know, Indians are too busy attacking other Indians. Kill everyone inside before killing those outside. That is your clever strategy. That shut him up. Grudgingly, they acknowledged that I could hold my own. Those days were such fun with our silly arguments and debates. The hours in the car passed so quickly. But yesterday, when I got into the bus after the show, Kettle class felt melancholic. The happy, heated conversations had subsided. The arguments and counter-arguments were gone. Everyone was silent. Instead of Eunice, there was a new driver. Apparently, one day Eunice had quarreled with someone and simply walked out, never to return. No one knows where he is. The front seat where Hassan used to sit and support me in my battle against the Malayalam mafia lay vacant. Shahbaz lost his zest for life. Jonah had taken leave and left the country during the revolution, and she did not return. And without anyone to fight them, the Malayalam mafia too lost its gusto. They spoke in soft voices, perhaps out of sympathy for me, perhaps in mourning for Hassan, perhaps worried about Eunice, or maybe they were wondering about their own place in this country. Javed, the city has lost its happy face. Today it is a city of fear. Island. During the busy work day at the studio, I forgot everything. But when I returned, the empty room was there to remind me. Memories like honeybees buzzed around me. Images came racing out of the corners of my mind, even though I tried hard to forget them. Baba lying on the sofa and watching TV, my tea waiting for me in its cup, with a lid on top. Dinner for the night, cooked and ready. I remembered all those times that I had offered to make tea or cook dinner, and how every single time Baba had refused, doing it by himself had brought him a profound happiness. Baba had lived alone in this city for 22 long years, a life of aloneness, of coming home alone after work, of cooking dinner alone, of washing clothes alone, of ironing them alone, of making his bed alone. Bade Taya had invited him several times to come and stay with the family, but Baba refused. He had also not got a visa to bring us over. He must have realized soon enough that it was impossible to support a family on his income in this big city. And by the time he was able to afford it, he had got used to this solitary life. When I joined him, he was planning to continue in a rented flat, but my uncles and aunts opposed the plan.
insisting that it was not a good idea to leave a young girl by herself at home all day. And so Baba finally acquiesced and we moved into Taya Ghar. I wondered then where my life was taking me. I felt anxious about living side by side with the chachas, mamus and mamis I only knew from their occasional visits home. It was my first time living away from Ma. I knew better than to accept the kind of love and affection Ma had given me. Taya Ghar is a big house which Taya had divided into several flats. There are 6 families here with 14 children among them. One of the flats is shared by 4 single men who are related to us. The downstairs kitchen and the living cum dining area are common spaces. 3 families including Bade Taya's and Chote Taya's family live downstairs, and 3 families including Baba and me and 2 other chachas live upstairs. There is a small kitchen up here in case the upstairs family want to make some coffee or a few chapatis for dinner. Everyone comes together at meal times or when guests visit. Otherwise, we all stick to our little corners of this house. And so, although we seem like a joint family, we all manage to safeguard our privacy. This was Bade Taya's dream too. A family house where all the brothers could live together even in this foreign country city. While leading their own private lives, it was he who searched for a suitable house and renovated it to make separate flats. And perhaps that is why among our friends and family, the house came to be named after him. A small sitting area, a bedroom and a bathroom. This was a small universe that Baba and I had carved out for ourselves in Taya's Ghar. Even though it was tiny, I loved it from the start. The bedroom had a small balcony that faced a highway. I learned later that others in the house had rejected the room because of the roadside noise. But that did not trouble me. I could sit in the balcony and stare at the sky for long as I wanted, gazing at birds and airplanes. Below was the road with vehicles and people in them. And far away was the skyline with its big buildings and glittering lights. Just beyond the highway was a small park that got busy in the evenings with crowds of people on its green bed of grass. People came to walk, to let their kids play, to swing on the swings, to enjoy a round of badminton or a game of football. Young men came to show off, couples came to sit and talk. A bit later, there would be picnicking families, and I would watch their little arguments and love stories. That balcony was a window to a wide world, and that flat was the home of my dreams. Baba gave me the bedroom and started sleeping in a small cot in the front room. Other than when he needed to change clothes or iron them, he never came to the bedroom. His space was now in the living room, in front of the TV. To be honest, in the beginning, life in the house was boring. Imagine a father and daughter who did not really have much of a relationship, alone with each other in a flat. We had nothing to talk about at first. The 20 years that Baba had lived alone in this city had created a distance between us. And Baba had always been frugal in conversation. That frugality only increased when his adult daughter came to stay. Our flat felt like a quiet, stern military camp. We breathed freely only when he joined the rest of Taya's Ghar at meal times or when he visited the other flats. But I did not let Baba continue with his grey ways. Within 6 months, I charmed him. Baba started melting before my eyes. I began speaking openly and laughing freely. Today, when I walked into the flat, I remembered a childhood story of mine that Baba had recounted to me. I was 6 or 7 years old and losing my milk teeth. I was afraid of having my teeth plugged. One of my relatives tried to get rid of my fears by telling me that my tooth would turn into gold if I left it inside a book. I asked Baba if that was true. Baba said yes, hoping that would encourage me. But I had more questions. How long should I keep the truth in the book? How much gold per tooth? Would I get more gold if I left it in the book for longer? After Baba gave reassuring replies to all my questions, I asked him to give me 2 of his tips so that I could turn them into gold. Baba laughed a lot that day, remembering my precautious answer, and I joined in with some chagrin. Remembering that made me cry today. Javed, I missed Baba all the more. I'm only beginning to understand what I have lost. Everyone here thinks I'm a very brave girl. What they don't know is that my laughter and confidence and all the noise I make is just a excuse. Deep inside, I'm in pain and I don't want anyone to know. Even so, when I feel lonely, I try to call a friend, but everyone is busy. No one has the time to talk. This house is full of people, but I'm like an island in the middle. Javed, why did fate isolate me like this? Why were the 2 people I loved taken away from me? Beckoned into the depths of tragedy. Is life a series of questions without answers?
Harami. Ashraf Akka, Bade Taya, has the final word in our family. He is Baba's eldest brother. When he decides something, whether it's right or wrong, there are no appeals against it. This is not because of any authoritarian tendency of his, but from the deep respect he has earned from taking care of his family and fulfilling his responsibilities. It was Taya who brought all the young men in his family above the age of 20 to this country. He got them jobs and married them off well. He took on Dada's responsibilities and fulfilled them even more meticulously than Dada would have. And the family has not forgotten that. Baba and his other brothers do not even sit in front of him or raise their voices when he is near. They never go against a decision he takes. If anyone fears him a little less, it is us, the younger generation. Taya first came here with the help of a distant uncle of his. He spent a long time searching for a job, applying to many firms. None of them gave him work, and some told him that he was not qualified to even be a helper. In those days, another uncle of Taya's had a barber in the Sock, which dated back to the 50s when the British had ruled. In those days, all the important men of the city came to that shop to get shaves and haircuts. Taya used to go and sit there with a long face. One day, a senior police officer went there for a haircut when Taya was around. He remembered Taya from his last visit too and asked the uncle about this young man sitting in the barber shop. Mamu humbly informed him that this was his unemployed nephew. The police officer told Taya to come to the police headquarters the next day. Taya went and was hired as an office boy. Over many years of hard work, rising through the ranks, Taya made it to the position of civil sergeant. He taught himself Arabic, mathematics, computers, emailing. He learned to Google. An Englishman would be impressed if he heard Taya speak English today. And without anyone's help, he is now a senior policeman. He was also responsible for my arrival in the city. By the time Baba began dreaming of it, Taya had planned for it. I boarded a plane to get here before I even got my degree certificates in hand. This human trafficking was the result of my mother's tearful phone calls, full of fears about losing control over me if I continued to live in the village. I did not want to come. I even complained to my mother that it would have been better if she had married me off to some Taliban guy. What kind of work would I get without even a certificate? I was sitting in Taya Ghar, pitying myself, when the program coordinator of Orange Radio, Imtiaz Sir, happened to tell Anwar Mamu that he was looking for a young woman who could handle the Hindi program. They were old friends. I do know a chatterbox girl, but her Urdu is stronger than her Hindi, Mamu said. Oh, we have lots of Urdu listeners as well, Imtiaz Sir replied. It would be ideal if she could mix both. Anyhow, bring her in for an interview. When Anwar Mamu told me this the next day, I exploded with happiness. I had longed for such a job. I would do this job even for no pay, I exclaimed. But do you know Hindi? Anwar Mamu asked. Anyone who knows how to use their tongue can speak Hindi. Don't worry, I assured him. I had learned Urdu and Farsi in school, not Hindi. And I had picked up a little Arabic as my third language. My knowledge of Hindi came entirely from Bollywood movies. Thanks to the Khans of Bollywood, I could manage a little Hindi. I decided that was enough to try my hand at the job. But everyone at home was against my working in radio. Sippy auntie led the opposition with Baba and all my chachas and mamus siding with her. They argued that the radio job was all about flirting with man, and the woman in the house agreed with them. When it seemed that everyone had abandoned me, a one person alone came forward to support me. My Bade Taya, Sergeant Ashraf Azmat Khan. You may all live in the city, but you might as well be in Faisalabad. For all you know of the world, this is a different city. If a girl gets to become a radio jockey here, it is a matter of pride, not embarrassment. Our Samira has a gift for talking. Why should we waste an opportunity? She has to express herself. Taya asked, looking directly at Sippy auntie. It's true, and after all, it's not forever. Just till her certificates arrive and she can look for a job. Why should she sit at home and be bored till then? When Aisha, auntie also unexpectedly came on board for me, the men stopped wagging their tongues. And on the day of my interview, it was my Taya who came with me, taking Baba's place as my guardian. He did not want me to lose this job for lack of a supportive presence. That's Taya for you. I was interviewed by the managing director, Rajivan Sir, as well as Imtiaz Sir and Fatima Madam. They asked me to do a commentary for an India-Pakistan cricket match, a mock live-in with Fatima Madam. Interview Rajivan Sir about his job as managing director and sing a Hindi song. At the end of the interview, Rajivan Sir asked me when I could join. Sahib, even without your recommendation, the Samira would have become a radio jockey. She's such a smart talker. I have no doubt that she's going to be a star. Imtiaz Sir patted my shoulder when we were leaving. Everyone at home was wondering why Taya, who had a reputation for his honesty and impartiality, for not bowing his hat to ask for favors, had set out to help me get this ordinary radio job. Some said it was because of a special fondness for me as the first girl child of my generation, and others thought it might be out of a special regard for Baba. But I knew of yet another secret reason. My fierce Taya, who could easily take on the entire world, feared only one person on earth, and that was his wife, my Sippy auntie. Her real name was Zulfi, but long ago Some toddler in the family had anointed her Sippy with his unformed tongue and the name stuck. She herself preferred it. The unwritten law of Taya Ghar was that nothing happened without Sippy auntie's approval. Even Taya was not exempt. But you know me a little, don't you? You think I would go along with that? By the age of 12, I had learned to return Ma's fierce glances and respond with 12 words for every word she spoke. By the time I was in college, I had learned to ignore her scolding and retreat into my room with my cell phone. Remember how you guys used to call me secretly and not so secretly? A harami chokri. That was me. Not just outside, but also inside my house. I did not waste too much obedience on my dada and dadi, or chachas, mamus and mamis. I can even say proudly that my family grudgingly learned to respect me for expressing my opinions to anyone's face, for charming my way into getting what I wanted. My biggest admirer was Taya, and the main reason for that was that even in the brief interludes during which they came for their holidays, I was able to best Sippy auntie. Taya secretly enjoyed my performances, and so whenever I put forward my point of view, Taya would concede that I had a point. He who knows Farsi is obviously educated. He would prefer his support of me. The women of the household often used me as the middle woman when they wanted favors from the man, like a persuasive insurance agent. I became good at getting my stern and practical uncle to do what I wanted. And that was Taya's idea. I would be the mediator between him and Sippy auntie. He used me when he wanted to get Sippy auntie to agree to something. The funny thing is, Sippy auntie had also used me exactly like this. Though she ruled the house, Sippy auntie was scared of Taya and never did anything without his permission. He never knew though. They were both afraid of each other and used me and that strong, bold tongue of mine for getting their work done. Taya Ghar. On weekends and holidays, Taya Ghar was crowded with guests. Most of them came to seek favors from Taya or complain to him. A job for someone, a land dispute back in the village, suspicion about a wife. They were convinced that Taya had all the solutions, like a zamidar. Taya would sit in a chair in the middle and listen. He would get them jobs in small companies here and there, or call a politician in the village to solve disputes. And so everyone in the city had faith in him. They believed that Ashraf Sahib's Taya Ghar was a place of solutions. Besides strangers, there would also be distant uncles, cousins and young bachelors who knew the family from back home. At least 20 people sat down to eat lunch after Zoom prayers. Taya insisted on feeding everyone who came home on that day. That was also the day all the women worked together in the kitchen. During the week, each woman made meals for her own family. But on holidays, we all joined together to make a biryani or rice and mutton masala curry. Though the other man would not even come to the kitchen door, Baba and Khaled Chacha would work with us in the kitchen. If they were around in the house, Baba's mutton masala was famous in the city. When he used to live alone, friends and family requested him to come and visit and bring along his mutton masala. And Baba enjoyed spending time in the kitchen where the news of the week and all the gossip got freely shared. There were some regular guests who contributed to the kitchen life. One such was Baluchi Baba, who would arrive at 9 in the morning. I don't know why that uncle was called Baluchi and if that was his real name. From the time I had known him, he was called Baluchi. No one knew him by a different name. Baluchi Baba's arrival would transform Tayas into a real zamidar. Taya would scratch his legs and sit in the living room like in the old black and white movies. Baluchi barber would trim Taya's moustache, shave his face, cut his hair and keep murmuring in his ear. Then Baluchi barber would come to the kitchen, sitting at the threshold. He would tell us everything that had happened in the city, including who had just arrived from the village, whose daughter was getting married, who had just lost their job and who was about to leave on Umrah. Another regular was Chamar Chacha, a cobbler, who would come every week to the gully in front of Taya Ghar. Perhaps he was the last surviving cobbler in the city. He had come here long ago from some village near Lahore and continued to ply the same trade. He had at the most 2 or 3 customers a day. I always puzzled over how Chamar Chacha with his small job and tiny income survived in this big expensive city. What could he save from his meager income? What would he send home to his village? And how would they survive on that? Thinking about this made me sad. And so once a month at least, I would take him my shoes, even though they were in good condition. Beti, these shoes have all their stitches. What do you need me to do? He would ask, turning the shoes around in his hands. No, Chacha, nothing is broken. Just reinforce it, I would tell him. By lunchtime, Chamar Chacha would also come to Taya Ghar. Taya had many acquaintances like Chamar Chacha. When he was wandering around jobless, he brought me something to drink. I must not forget them in my good days. Taya would say there were a couple of them that I especially liked. One was Amir Chacha. Baba would say laughingly, he has a loose nut somewhere in there. Amir Chacha would bring with him interesting gossip from the city. He also knew how to tell a story, and so as soon as Chacha arrived, all the women folk would gather around the table to hear his stories. Another guest I loved was Kareem Chacha, but for completely different reasons. While all the men I knew, including my own Baba, were constantly worrying about raising their daughters, Kareem Chacha was delighted to have 4 daughters. Occasionally, he could be heard explaining to Allah for not giving him more daughters. He did not distinguish between his 2 sons and his 4 daughters, loving and respecting and educating them in equal measure. I have visited his home back in the village. It is a joy to be a woman in that house. Kareem Chacha had painstakingly created such a home. I have often felt that he was madder than a drunk Sufi. His ideas about love and women were too radical for ordinary man. According to his philosophy, a household without girls was like a tree without flowers. And the more the flowers, the prettier the tree. Smiling gently, he would say, when my beautiful daughters grow up, young men will circle the house like honeybees, eager for a taste of nectar. I'll be proud father then. It won't be too long now before lines of young men will form outside my door, each begging my permission to marry my daughter. But they will all be disappointed. I want to see them wandering through the streets, sick with love, muttering the names of my daughters, like Punnu in the tale of Sasi Punnu. A woman must fall in love on her own. The devil will find a home in the heart of a woman who does not fall in love. She will wreck her home. Whereas love turns women into angels, In the matter of love, a woman should be as wise as a snake and sharp-eared as an eagle. Only a stupid woman would fall in love with the first good-looking man she meets. She should not surrender to just anyone. Karim Chacha's advice to every woman was to wait till she found the man that Allah had chosen for her. But how to find him? I often heard him advising his young daughters, you must watch him secretly. Keep an eye on his actions and words. The sign of a good lover is not how much he loves you. And in fact, if he loves you too much, be careful. Maybe he is selfish. There is no greater misery than living with a selfish man or a suspicious one. On the other hand, you can trust him fully if he respects the Prophet, reads books, bears himself with dignity, speaks with humility, respects women, treats poor people kindly, loves children, and is optimistic about life. If you find such a man, whoever he is, I will marry you to him. And I'll respect your womanly ability to find such a man. He did not merely dreams and spout advice. When his oldest daughter found a man who fit this description, he approved wholeheartedly and got them married. I don't have wealth or status or a big house. I only have one thing to be proud of. I'm the father of 4 daughters. Karim Chacha would often say, earning my admiration.
Farhana. Yesterday I went for a walk in the sock by myself. I was feeling suffocated in the room. Taya and Mamu would not approve if they knew, but I needed to get out at least a little bit. When I got ready and went downstairs, Farhana was sitting in the hall. Baji, where are you going? She asked. Going to the sock for a walk. Want me to come with you? No, I don't need any company, I said, stepping outside. My mamus and chachas, children are mostly boys, and there are 13 of them. All of them are high voltage characters. Imagine sulfuric acid with arms and legs. The oldest of them, Nawaz, is only 17 years old and the youngest is 3. By rights, they are all kissing cousins of mine, and I would often tease them. Couldn't you kids have been born a little earlier? Then we could have held hands and fallen in love. Instead, now I have you trailing me everywhere calling me Baji Baji. I'm fond of them all. The only girl among my cousins is Farhana, Alak Chacha's daughter. She is in 11th standard in one of the Pakistani schools in the city. You know what they say about Sahiba, the heroine of our folk love stories? 9 angels died the moment they saw how beautiful she was. That could be about Farhana. She was that kind of beautiful. We have been friends since when she used to come to the village for the holidays, and after I moved here, our friendship deepened. She would tell me about every little thing going on in her life. She was seeing a boy, a Punjabi boy studying in the 12th standard in the Indian school. She showed me his photo on her cell phone. Handsome guy. But this Sardaji of hers struck me as old-fashioned, wearing his turban even in these modern times. I don't know where she found the courage to fall in love with him. People say this is a practical age, that kids these days don't fall in love till they check religion, caste, race and color. But I think that is just how adults like to comfort themselves. Young people have never checked off lists before they fall in love. They love whom they love, like Farhana with her Praveen Kumar. They met at the bus stop. Sometimes she shows me their messages, XXX rated messages that make me even go, what? At home, Farhana is quiet. She has had a strict upbringing. Her Baba and her Ma are always around her. Yet she coolly manages to deceive them. I once asked her, Farhana, won't you get into trouble if Chacha or Chachi saw these messages? Baji, you are so silly. You think I haven't thought through this? I have saved his number as Lulu Center. If a message comes when I'm with Baba or Ma, I go, oh, these shopping promotions, what a pain they are. I'll even open the message and read it aloud. Hurry, hurry, up to 50% reduction on every item for the next 3 days. Come and enjoy. I laughed thinking of Farhana's little game. Poor Chacha and Chachi, who don't know any English, they had to believe her. Instead of going to school, Farhana would roam around shopping malls and go to the movies with him. But if you are wearing your school uniform, won't people know you should be in school? I thought I was asking a legitimate question. I think you have lost all your common sense by hanging out with the idiot Indians in your studio, she said in exasperation. After all, I learned all these tricks from seeing you trick mama when I came to visit you on vacations, and now you are asking me this. Baji, how hard is it to avoid school uniform? Who would doubt me if I say today is a special day at school? Earth Day, Green Day, Mother's Day, Labor Day. I had to bow before her cunning. I'm sure I did not play as many tricks on my Baba. By mistake, I asked her one day, my child, when did you become old enough to fall in love? What to do, Baji? I told myself, wait for a couple of years before starting all this, but this body fed on animal meat and muscle. Does this body listen to me? After all, only the body knows what it wants. One of these days, I think I might just attack him and ravage him on the street. That was her response. I'm scared to ask her whether she was actually done something with him. She might just say yes. If I went on a walk with her, she would talk non-stop about her exploits. Not for a minute can she be silent. Today I want to walk alone, all by myself. A city without a name. I walked alone for a long time through narrow streets and interlacing alleys that were centuries old. They were all mostly empty, and the few people I passed by walked in a hurry, as if they were afraid of someone. They looked fearfully at parked cars. Perhaps they wondered if any of them would explode, or maybe they were afraid a gunman would appear suddenly out of a hidden corner and shoot everyone on the street before disappearing. And that kind of news we were hearing about the neighboring countries. Who could be sure that would not happen in this country as well? Javed, the only reason I'm not naming these streets is because their names are unimaginative. It is enough to call this place city. The rulers of this place have built a bunch of roads in their own names, cheapening their city's name even further. This used to be the city of the Sumerians, who 3000 years before Christ worshipped a mother goddess called Enki. After that, Chamenids, Parthians and Sassanids ruled the city in turn. After the onset of Islam, Persian emperors, caliphs and the Ottomans walked the city. Then the Portuguese took over, and after them the British. When they left, the caliphs returned, but still the name of this city does not play on our heartstrings the way Baghdad, Cairo, Basra, Tehran, Damascus, Faisalabad, Istanbul and Hyderabad do. I don't know why. These streets have been trading with India and Pakistan for hundreds of years. It was the Gujarati Baniyas who brought the world to this city. They brought cloths from Bombay, tin lamps from Cairo, carpets from Persia and Turkish. Delight from Istanbul. They were the ones who transformed an abundant city into a city of celebrations. I still remember how vibrant and happy the streets were when I first arrived. The Malabari Gali, where Indian clothes were sold, was always crowded. The shops that sold Kashmiri shawls and cotton churidar kurtas from Pakistan were full of plump Gujarati women. The gossipy merchants seated in front of their shops selling Persian carpets, the vendors who came out of their maid in Malaysia electronics stores to lead customers in by hand. The Bangladeshis man hawking cheap Chinese trinkets, the money exchange dadas waiting for foreigners in front of heaps of currency notes, the men playing dice at the side of the road and talking to the parrots in their cages. My favorite were the shops selling sweets and spices. I would wander near them just to enjoy the fragrance of cardamom, cinnamon, ginger, cumin and pepper. The vendors called me Beti and offered me almonds, pistachios, cashew nuts, dried figs and watermelon seeds. They all used to know Baba and he had introduced me to them proudly. This is my daughter, very educated. She works for the radio. Those were happy days, but like a river that frees suddenly in mid-flow, all those happiness have disappeared. Most of the shops are now half shuttered and shopkeepers live in constant fear. How quickly the city where people trusted each other turned into a city of hostilities. Where there was once friendship, there is now suspicion. I had turned to go home when an Arab woman coming from the opposite direction surprised me by suddenly reaching out and holding my hand. "Do you recognize me?" Her voice was heavy with gloom. I shook my head after searching my memory for her face. "We met once before. I'm your friend, Ali's mother." "Ali? Ali Fardan?" "Yes, that Ali. I remember, yes, I remember," I said, my voice trembling. "She used to travel together. We used to talk about a lot. He was fond of you." She embraced me and started crying. Her tears burned my face. I could not stand there, my face touching hers. Freeing myself, I ran like a wild animal through gullies full of shadows.